Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, I'm excited as I could possibly be to introduce our guest to you. But before I do, there are a few people that I want to thank that we always thank. We want to thank brassandwinds.com. Brass and Winds has been our go-to for our students for brass and wind instruments for many years, and we think they should also be your go-to because they're fantastic people. Brassandwinds.com. Check them out. You are tuned into Truer MU, the truth about music, a channel where we try to go deeper into music topics than you're usually going to get on most channels. If you want to learn more about the spirituality of music or the challenges of music or what it's like to be somebody in a particular living. And we also have courses too. If you're interested in jazz or if you'd like to get started on the piano, check us out at Truer MU. For those of you that follow this channel, you know that I attended Oberlin College, and you know something about my history because we get into a different part of it each time. When I was at Oberlin College, I was not a pianist, and I very much wanted to be. And there were a few people at Oberlin who I really looked to as inspiration. And our guest is one of them. I used to watch her play, and I was very moved by her performances. But it wasn't only that. It was that I noticed that when she was given feedback from professors or in master classes, she took that feedback in a way that was different from the other students. It was an intelligent response, not just a nodding to say that, yes, I'm listening to you, but really taking notes and taking them and herself very seriously. So I was very inspired by that in my own desire to become a pianist and an educator. And to my delight, I caught up with Dr. Boyd again on Facebook, started watching her channel, and invited her to join us. Dr. Kate Boyd is a professor of piano at Butler University in Indianapolis, Indiana, where she was recently promoted to the rank of full professor. In the summer, she serves as the head of the piano faculty of the internationally renowned Interlochen Arts Camp in Northern Michigan. She is a recognized performer and educator with numerous recordings and collaborations to her name. And she is also the creator of the popular YouTube channel, The Piano Prof. Dr. Boyd, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for that very generous introduction.
Oh, it's heartfelt. I really am delighted to talk to you, and you've been quite an inspiration to me, even in the years I haven't seen you. Thank you for the example you set.
Well, thank you.
My pleasure. Let's start with a question. Why the piano? And is it the only instrument you play?
Well, I actually started playing the piano. I am the younger sibling of two. My brother is 4 years older than I am. And when we were children, he started taking piano lessons. And I really looked up to him. And I wanted to do everything he did. My mother, just to economize on childcare and errands, would take both of us to his lessons, and I would sit there and listen. And then when he practiced, I would pester him, and then I would come up and I would like bang on the keys while he was trying to practice. And so when I was 4, my mother added me to the piano lesson. So I started taking formal lessons when I was 4, and partly because I pestered my brother. So I'm glad I did, because it really became a major part of my life, as you know. Then when I was in 3rd grade, I started taking violin lessons, and I played the violin fairly seriously as a second instrument all the way through high school. And I picked up viola in about 10th grade, which was very useful. It seems like a lot of people really needed violists in
Yeah.
string quartets and orchestras and things like that. And I kept that up all the way until I went to Oberlin. And then I just, you get more serious as you grow more, grow older and more focused. And so I just didn't feel like I could give the time to both instruments the way I wanted to. And the piano was always my first love. And then in 4th grade, we picked up band instruments. And so I learned the flute.
Wow.
It was the only thing I could make a sound out of.
Okay.
You go into a room, they give you a clarinet, and they give you a trumpet, or a mouthpiece or instrument with a mouthpiece, and I couldn't make any sounds out of it. And then they gave me a flute, and they said, go like this with your mouth, and then I made some kind of very wimpy noise, and that was enough. And so I played in the school orchestra, which was very small at our school. Just a few, and it met at 7:30 in the morning, like before school started. And then I played in the band, in the pep band, and the marching band, and that was, of course, much more serious at our school. I grew up in Illinois,
Hmm.
but that was really just kind of social.
Right. So you play a lot of instruments, or you have
Used
played a
to.
lot of instruments,
Used to.
but you chose the piano. And I know it was always your primary instrument, but you did have choices. You could have deviated along the way and decided, well, violin's better or flute is better. Why the piano?
Well, I just think I wasn't as good on the other instruments. It's like when you have a first language, or, I just had I wouldn't say I always had an ease with the piano, because that certainly wasn't the case. But I don't know, like I liked the fact that with the piano you play all the voices in the orchestra. When you play violin, you play
Mm.
one voice. I mean, I'm not saying that's better or worse. I'm not saying it's a superior instrument, but I know for me, I enjoyed the complexity of what you could do with the piano. Um, yeah.
It
Also,
sounds
you
like
don't
you.
have to hold it up. You don't have gravity working against you in the same
Mm,
way.
mm,
Um, and the calluses on the fingers. I mean, those were little things.
right.
What I enjoyed about string playing and really miss is the camaraderie and the group. Like I was in a string
Yeah.
quartet in high school. Like not a, we would do weddings, and I was in various school orchestras, youth orchestras, and I enjoyed that whole kind of community feeling. Like, and I'll never forget some of the pieces we played. Like, I was an exchange student in Germany when I was 16, and I was in the orchestra, and it was students from Germany, France, and England, all from the sister cities from those countries. So it
Yeah.
was a big youth orchestra, and we performed in Germany, France, and England. This
Wow.
program that included Beethoven Third Piano Concerto, which later on, many years later, I ended up learning and playing with an orchestra. But also, we performed pictures at an exhibition.
Uh-huh.
And I was playing the viola in the middle of the orchestra. I could hear all the voices all around me, and that really made me a better pianist, to be honest, because I have the ability, just from some of my own limited experience as a string player, to hear some of the more orchestral capabilities of the piano in my mind's ear. So it gives me some oral picture to go for sometimes.
Yes, I play a number of instruments too, and I do find that it helps me. For instance, I'm working on my guitar playing and getting better at it. And there is something I find that as I get better at guitar, I also get better at the piano. Are you finding that there's a crossover?
Oh, for sure. I know, like, if I'm working right now, I'm working on a Beethoven sonata. The first movement it's Opus 7. The
Hmm.
first movement is very symphonic, very orchestral. And so I can hear in the left hand, I can think of it as I mean, as a tongued wind instrument,
Yeah.
not the flute, but I can feel like what that would feel like to tongue an instrument. And then with bowings, a lot of times with piano, I'm thinking in terms of bowings, like the third movement of this Opus 7 is kind of written like a string quartet. And so I can imagine whether that would be up bow or down bow on the violin or the viola.
Hmm.
I don't play the cello. My brother played the cello. See, he also played a lot of instruments. It was very normal in my family. His second instrument was cello, and his third instrument was Barry sax and so forth. He's
Wow.
always been much more talented than I am at picking up an instrument and being able to play it like 2 days later. So he had um, a very illustrious career as a jazz musician, and lives in Australia now, owns a software company and so forth. But he still gigs on the weekends and has played with a lot of major. He was on the cruise ships for like 10 years. Anyway, I know this isn't about him, but
No, that's okay.
he's played taught himself the accordion and taught
Mhm.
himself the bagpipes, taught himself all the different wind instruments and so forth. So
Yeah, well, the fact that you bring that up means that there's something about that that you admire and that you like, and that
hmm
maybe even, you'd like to see in some of your students, a kind of a bravery, perhaps.
hmm I think that just going for it, just picking something up and trying it out and making sounds out of it is great. Yeah, and it's something. And I also think that the ability to improvise, and you would know as a jazz musician yourself that back when we were at Oberlin, it was kind of considered to be more separate, perhaps, than I think people think of it now.
Hmm.
And so, if you were a classical pianist and you were I mean, I don't want to be all like back in the day, it was definitely like this, but my impression was if you were a classical pianist, that jazz was kind of a separate thing and
Right.
that it was kind of harder to learn both somehow. But now it's pretty normal, like for my undergraduate students to also be in jazz combo, taking jazz secondary lessons and so forth. And I think that gives people incredible versatility um, at the instrument.
Mhm, I agree. And with your love of just going for it and not being afraid to try and make a sound, do you improvise yourself in any way, classical or jazz?
It's funny because I have tried over the years to improvise, and I always end up reverting to pieces I know or patterns I already know.
Hmm.
So it's just never been something that I have felt moved to do. I have done other creative things like, especially write. I've written on nothing, just for myself and so forth. But so I just feel like for me, um, improvising and composing at the piano is just not something that I have ever been particularly drawn to.
Yeah, okay. But you see the value in it clearly.
I certainly do. I certainly
Yeah.
do. And I think that if I had started at a young age doing that as a normal thing, then I would probably have that skill more naturally. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, now it's one thing to go to Oberlin and be a piano major, and it's quite another to wind up a piano professor. Can you talk about the journey there?
So I graduated from Oberlin, and then I was trying to figure out or as I was graduating from Oberlin, I was trying to figure out what to do for graduate school. And a lot of my friends and classmates were also applying to different schools. And so I actually applied, I'll tell you the whole story. I applied to 3 schools for my master's. I applied to IU to study with Georgi Shebak. I applied to Juilliard to study with Lowenthal and to Stony Brook to study with Gilbert Kalish. And I actually got into all 3 places. And I was like, oh, Juilliard's the most famous place. I should definitely go there. And that summer, and so I registered and paid the deposit. I said no to the other 2 places. And then over the summer, I was at Kent Blossom Music Festival as a pianist. And it was a chamber music festival. And I met a bunch of people, some of whom went to Juilliard. And they were all like, "Oh my gosh, you got in with Gilbert Kalish and you're not going to go study with him?" And I'm like, "But I got into Juilliard." And they're like, "Yeah, but I mean, they were like, well, And so I got kind of cold feet about the whole Juilliard experience. And I'm sure it would have been great, but I called up Gil in the summer. He was at Tanglewood, and I asked him if he still had a space for me. And he said, sure. Yeah. Like he made me like grovel and explain exactly why. And I lost the deposit to Juilliard. And I think, I still have days today where I'm like, what would have happened if I had done that? Because I would have like musicians know that Stony Brook is a well-known music school, but non-musicians do not know. They only know Juilliard as like the name brand, right?
Right.
But Gil really taught me so much about how to physically play the instrument. And I feel like I would have had, 2 years at Juilliard, and I don't know if I would have learned that. I mean, and even at Stony Brook, there were tons of people who had done a master's at Juilliard and now were doing a doctorate at Stony Brook. And they were talking about how much they were learning and how, intensive that environment was, especially for new music and chamber music. And of course, Gil Kalish is a master teacher. So anyway, I did a master's at Stony Brook. And then while I was at Stony Brook, and I had already spent a year in Germany as an exchange student, so I was excited about the possibility of someday going back. And there were 2 students at Stony Brook in my class with Gil Kalish who had studied with a particular teacher in Germany. And his name was Ari Vardy. And they said, Ari Vardy and Gil Kalish, they really complement each other well because Gil Kalish is all about new music and chamber music, and Vardy is all about like competitions and solo music, and their teaching styles really enhance each other. And so I was like, okay. So I went and I was already, I already knew German, so I went and auditioned, and then I went over there and I did a degree with Vardy. And when I was done with that, because I didn't know that if I wanted to go back and do a doctorate or not, it felt like I was in school for a really long time and I wanted to have other experiences. But then I went and did a long term residency at the Banff Center after I was in Germany.
Mhm.
And Gil was one of the guest artists. And so I got a chance to work with him some more. And I was like, oh, I have to go back and keep working with this guy because he's just helping me so much. So then I started a DMA at Stony Brook,
Mhm.
and I did my class stuff, all my classes in those 2 years, and most of my recitals. You have to play 6 recitals. And then when I had pretty much everything except my final recital done, I went on the job market and I applied for a Fulbright to go to Germany. And I had the luckiest week, or the most sensational week of my life. I've never had anything since then like this, and probably won't again. But in 1 week, I got a job offer from that job search and the Fulbright. And I had to make a decision. Do I want to take a teaching job, or do I want to go to Germany again?
Yeah.
And I was like, if I go to Germany, I might never get another teaching job. I mean, these are not like just floating around. But I also, the Fulbright was to do chamber music with a string quartet that I had met at Tanglewood. They were the string quartet in residence, and they were breaking up and they wanted to form a piano quartet. And so I was going to like form this piano quartet with them. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this and hope for the best in the future. So that's what I did. And I was over there for 2 years. The piano quartet broke up. I continued, I worked with a teacher there who was just amazing, Arbo Waldma. He's an
Mhm.
Estonian teacher, amazing pedagogue. I learned so much about the piano and about the psychology of playing, about the psychology of teaching from him. And then I moved. I met my now ex-husband, and then we moved to Dublin. He was Irish, so I lived in Dublin for 3 years, and I did a lot of new music and some teaching and some chamber music and so forth. And then at the end of that time, I went on the job market back in the States, and I got a job in Ohio at Heidelberg University.
Mhm.
And then that job was not a tenure track job. So I started applying again for a job, and I was there 1 year, and then I got this job. And now this is my 18th year.
Wow.
Can you believe it?
No, that's a great story too.
That was a lot of moving. I
Yeah.
remember I had my things in boxes, and I kept, finding, like, I would have furniture for a period of time, and then when I was done, I would have a garage sale, and then go to a new place and go to a garage sale and buy things. And yeah, so it was a very itinerant time. And I was very fortunate to be able to have all those experiences for sure. I was very fortunate that I already knew German. I was fortunate that when I was in Germany, I was teaching English too, to
Mhm.
to help support myself. I
Wow.
was fortunate to have the Fulbright, and to have all those job interviews and so forth. So yeah, it was very, very, yeah.
Two things I want to ask about that. First of all, I noticed that you were continually talking about your fascination with what you were learning. Of course, a lot of people, they study with an artist because they got a goal in mind. I want to be the best. I want to be a performer. But you were just really interested in what they were teaching you. And it sounds like, you really had teaching on the brain the whole time. Would you say that's accurate?
Um, I think in retrospect, it's accurate. I think at the time, I really felt a lot of pressure to like somehow perform, and that it was supposed to somehow manifest itself in some kind of performing career. And I didn't, I mean, I knew that teaching would be a part of it, and I knew that college teaching jobs had performing and teaching as components.
Yeah.
I would say that my focus really until I got the teaching jobs was very, very much on my own playing and on my own technique and repertoire and learning things. Um, I did a bunch of competitions when I was in Europe to get that experience. I do not have the temperament for competitions. I never felt, I just would get such anxiety, and I never felt um, comfortable with the idea that you would have all these people come and they've been practicing for months and months and months and months, and then you would like pick one person to win. It just felt like, oh, and they everybody had to learn the same repertoire from the same lists. It just felt very stultifying to me. But at the time, it seemed like that was the expectation. Um, and there really wasn't a major focus on teaching in the way that has started to develop in the field, right? I mean, piano pedagogy used to be a completely separate area, and only recently has it kind of been embraced, I think, by both sides, right?
Hmm.
Um, that's my impression. I'm saying I'm kind of asserting all of these things, and there will probably be people listening and saying, "Well, no, that's not my experience at all." And so I can
Hmm.
only say that you know, when you're learning, when you're going through a DMA program now, I think you will learn a lot more about teaching than I ever did from my program. And I think my program was very, very normal. I think there have been things that have been added in the past, 20 years to
Hmm.
these programs. Would you agree with that, Adam?
Well, I didn't have the same rigor that you did. So my entry into the classical study of piano is much briefer. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
little harder for me to answer that question.
Mm.
But I do want to ask you, um, you've been now a professor at Butler for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
When you started, did you feel like you were in the right place? You were a teacher, or has there come a moment when all of a sudden it hit you, hey, this is what I do. I really like this.
Well, I always see, I really like people and I really like community. As a matter of fact, I was just talking to my husband the other day, and my husband is a theologian and he teaches on the faculty here at Butler. And we were talking about, well, what word would you use to describe your kind of like your value system? And he was saying that his word would be reflection, because he likes to think, he likes to read, likes to ponder, which makes it appropriate that he's a theologian. And for me, I thought about it, and I really think that the word that describes my values is community. And I realized that there's a pattern there that kind of led me to that, to thinking that. And I really like to be together with people. I mean, I'm not an extrovert. I don't like to attend big parties, but there is a feeling, whether like if I'm playing a concert and I feel like I'm hosting a party. I really do. I feel like
Yeah.
I want it to be a good experience for the audience. I want to know the audience. I want to interact with them. I want to feel like we're all doing this thing together, and that I'm serving them an experience that is going to be memorable for them. Hopefully it is, who knows? But that's kind of my feeling. It's an event and we're all doing it together. When I'm teaching, I'm with a student and we're interacting. And I think I learned a lot about pedagogy and just that approach from Gil and from my other teachers as well. This idea of just meeting the person as a person, and then you work together on a thing, right? And it just
Hmm.
happens to be the piano, it happens to be repertoire, it happens to be technique. So your question was if I always felt like, or did I have an aha moment like, oh, I'm a teacher? Um, I mean, I knew that being a university professor, I would be teaching. And I've been, the kind of job I have, I teach applied music. I have not I don't also teach, music theory or oral skills or classroom classes. Although occasionally I've taught, piano lit or piano pedagogy or something like that. for the most part, I teach the way that I was taught. And I feel like I went through a very long apprenticeship. And so then when I turn around and do the other direction of it, it feels quite natural and it feels organic. So I would say I didn't have a moment where I was like, oh, I don't really like this. And now, like, oh, it's great. I really feel like I'm part of a long tradition that goes
Mhm.
back hundreds of years, and I learned from my teachers, and now I'm teaching my students, and then they will teach their students, and they will not all of them will teach in the same way. They will go out and they will be doing a lot of other different interesting things, and I always delight in hearing what they're up to. And students, a lot of my students, they stay in my life in various ways, and I really enjoy that. And I'm still in touch with Gil, by the way. We whenever I'm in New York, we get together and go out for lunch and catch up on everything. So, yeah, so that's very meaningful to me, both directions.
There's one aspect of the story you left out that I just happen to know from watching your videos. I'm a certified, or I was, I'm no longer certified, but I have been a certified Feldenkrais practitioner for many years. And so that's been important to my development in my teaching. You were fascinated by the Alexander technique. And you haven't mentioned that yet, but I'd like you to talk about it if it's important to you.
When I was in graduate school, we were very fortunate that there was an Alexander teacher who came and worked with us and gave us the opportunity to take lessons from her privately. And that really helped me. Around the same time, I was also taking Tai Chi. And so I did both of those things. Um, and it just really helped with my body awareness and my alignment. I moved around a lot. And so after that time in Stony Brook, I didn't like find another Alexander technique person. And also I didn't have a lot of financial means at the time because I was pretty itinerant. I was a student for a very long time. And so that is, but we have an Alexander teacher at Butler, and she has come into our studio class and worked with our students, and she also teaches a class for our students, a one credit class that the Butler University students can take. And so I always encourage my pianist students to take part in that, and a lot of them have been. And now that I know about her, I'm thinking, oh, I should get back, get some lessons again, because I know that just has been uh, it's just so helpful for pianists, for musicians to have hands-on tactile experience for how to align your spine, your neck, and sitting, standing, going from standing to sitting, going from sitting to standing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you
Um,
want to give a little background about what Alexander technique is?
Well, yes, I'm afraid I would misrepresent it. I would direct my listeners. Usually, I do jump in and say, "Well, my audience probably doesn't know," but I actually don't know as much about Alexander as I do Feldenkrais. So I prefer if you would speak a little about it.
Okay, so now I'm not an Alexander technique expert. Um, what my understanding is, and what my experience of it is it's a kind of theory of movement or a way of movement, and it's taught usually one on one. And people who become trained Alexander teachers have to go through a rigorous training that's many years long. And what it is, it's quite hands on, and it's all about kind of body awareness and kind of giving yourself permission to kind of take like to take the time you need. um, it's kind of a mind body thing, but
Mhm.
also it's about aligning the spine and how the head is on the spine, and not, we tend to sit kind of like this,
Mhm.
um, but it's about kind of learning how to have a very healthy positioning of your head on your spine. And that's this kind of idea of there being a string on the top of your head and drawing your head up, and then lengthening in the spine and hinging from your hips. All of that that is are things that I learned from Alexander technique. But the other part of it is very hands on. So you do a lot of sitting, standing, sitting, standing, you know, and then lying down and aligning everything. So it's a lot of kind of body memory and really feeling that and having your body learn a new way of movement.
Hmm. And I will add what I know of the similarities between the Feldenkrais method and the Alexander technique are that it's a somatic approach, which involves the learning process and it involves curiosity and sensation to uh, to get to the parts of you that you perhaps can't get to in any normal logical conversation. I can tell you you need to align your chin, but you're only going to do that with what you consciously know of your body. And how do you get to that part of your body that perhaps is unavailable to you? So the Alexander technique and the Feldenkrais method both have approaches to getting to expand your body schema, expand your body image so that you can make better use of yourself in a way that is hopefully gradual and friendly and does not invoke any kind of a trauma the way it might be if somebody said, sit up straight.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because it's certainly not just about wrenching your shoulders back and sitting
Right.
up, because that's a rigid posture too, and that'll cause all kinds of problems.
Yeah, you can follow all kinds of advice about how you should sit and how you should play, but if you're only using the parts of you that you know, it's a little like trying to brush your teeth with your foot if you have no awareness of your hand. You can do it, but it's going to kind of hurt. So, you know.